cashier. Get the money like a cashier. Customer, clientele. I was broke, that was last year. Getting money like a cashier. Get the money like a cashier. Benjamin, nothing less. I was broke, that was last year. Don't change 'em. I never switched up. Been down since day one. Stay social. People change them.
And hello, welcome to Dope Black Thoughts. My name is Marcus. How y'all doing this evening?
I'm Stefania.
I'm Hashim, also known as Hashade, trying to clean his glasses at the last minute.
And let's see, Kevin has decided to abandon us. Carter is apparently on at some point in time, but when he pops on, he'll be on, and we'll see what's up with Brother Omar at this stage. So other than that, though, today is the 20th of January. How y'all doing?
Good.
I ain't dead yet.
Right.
That's a good thing.
For those who love me, it's a good thing. But there are some people who are wishing that I was on the other side of the ground, the other side of the dirt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. Well, you know, I think that's for many of us.
Yeah. And to those people, I say, your mama. But
oh man, yes. So thing today was MLK. Obviously, Martin Luther King birthday was celebrated on Monday, the 18th, but his birthday is actually on the 15th of January, which is my mother's birthday, which is why I will never forget that. But you know, but they had to find a Monday, I guess, in order to celebrate this day, which is interesting because I was, you know, just reviewing the history of this day and how it came about. And as you all probably know, it was not popular to have this national holiday, and was voted against by many. And there are current senators, I think, now who voted against this holiday as well. I think I have to go back and look again, but yeah.
Wouldn't be a surprise, right?
Right. They'll hold on with their oxygen mask on their face.
Yeah, so that was definitely interesting to get that history, if you will, and kind of go from there. So, but nonetheless, it is what it is. So other than that, I just watching through some of the text, y'all got some things that's been going on. Like y'all got some kickoffs, and were y'all kicking off on Martin Luther King Day? Was there some significance to that?
Well, so I kick off on every Dr. King Day. Kick off in hopes that we would actually push and fulfill the dream. And when it's there's so much, right? When you talk about those who fought against the Dr. King holiday coming into be a holiday, Arizona stands out in my mind as the state that was holding out on that or didn't want to do it. And I think even after it was passed federally, Arizona still was lagging upon recognizing it as a holiday in the state. And, you know, that's the home of that racist John McCain. Some might say God rest his soul, but I'm not some. And it reminds me of the senator that took his place, Kristen Sinema, who refused to remove the racist filibuster, to vote to remove the racist filibuster so that people like us can make sure that voting rights were protected, and not even people like us, that all American citizens can make sure that they have their voting rights protected. But the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Parade, which is held in Denver on the third Monday of every January, it was a small turnout for me this year, or not for me. I think they had a small turnout this year. The weather was one of the warmest days that I've ever participated in this event. But it was a little disheartening, the corporatizing of Dr. King and the holiday and the watering down, the whitewashing to make him more palatable to white moderates and white conservatives always blows my mind and it disappoints me. So when you say kickoff, I would think about kicking something as it relates because of that. And then I was a little disheartened this year at the Murray because the Webb spoke last, and it was seeming as if, and I don't know the intricate details, that Mayor Wellington Webb had to grab the mic to speak because he wasn't on agenda. And we've heard all these other people pontificate through this. We heard the birther, Mike Kaufman, get up and talk about Dr. King. When you look at his congressional voting record and his action as mayor, he does things that are the antithesis of Dr. King's vision. Like, how does he get to speak at a time slot when Wilma Webb started this fight before I was born? She started this in 1973 to have this recognized, but they're at the end when everybody's tired, when folks aren't paying attention and people want to go. Yikes. So that kind of bothered me, and that kind of set the tone for the taste in my mouth of the celebration. And it also reminded me that, you know, Dr. King that we honor today is actually not who Dr. King was. So that's my Dr. King weekend. Yeah.
Ooh, can you expound upon that? Expound upon that.
Yeah. So the Dr. King that we honor today, right? I shouldn't say as a whole that those people like to honor, like to water Dr. King down, like to remove his blackness from him, like to have him be this timid, okay, kumbaya, equality instead of equity, Dr. Martin Luther King. And anytime, you know, black folks speak out against, anytime my black ass is spoken out against something, I get hit back from some white moderate of, well, Dr. King wanted, you know, all of us to get along together. And I'm like, you know, is that really, do you know anything about Dr. King other than spelling his initials? You know, like what do you really know about Dr. King? And Dr. King loved all people, but he also loved black people. And he was never afraid to say, do X, Y, Z for black people. And that is the Dr. King we don't celebrate today.
Well, and Dr. King became a little bit more militant minded, really toward the end of his very young life, when certain aspects of peace weren't working. But yeah, most people like to quote a Dr. King, I say verse, whether it's in an interview or discussions, but they really don't understand the complete context of it. But yeah, you're absolutely correct about all of that. It was such a controversial topic to even become a holiday. I think Ronald Reagan had made a statement. He ended up signing the bill in 1983 or 84, something like that. He ended up signing the bill to make it an official day. But he was asked a question if Dr. Martin Luther King was a communist. And I think his statement was, well, no, in 35 years. I guess that's when they released the FBI dossier on Dr. King. But yeah, you know, and so it's interesting. He wasn't popular when he died, and he was penniless when he died as well. So I find that interesting, but nonetheless,
when he died, his poll ratings were lower than the racist Donald Trump's poll ratings are, right? And so during that time when he died, we understand how polling is done and understand why his ratings were low. That's because a lot of folks didn't like Dr. King. And I also want to say for the record that there were some black folks that didn't like Dr. King. They're like the same way that people feel about Black Lives Matter right now, and those things that are making the hard push. There were black people that felt the same way about Dr. King. So Dr. King was Black Lives Matter before the title Black Lives Matter came out. So yeah.
That's interesting. I agree with you that people are washing him down. It's whitewashed more today than it has ever been. as far as Martin Luther King. I agree. What's astounding to me is the amount of hypocrisy that we see with people who quote from his sermons and from his speeches, and don't believe it, and don't hold those policies to be true.
Yep.
Hashim, it was good seeing you down there at all the events. I think we probably ran into each other about 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
I would say that the most inspiring part of Monday's event, I know many of you know Quincy Shannon.
Yeah.
Quincy Shannon had brought some students, as he do every year. And there was a reporter there that was about to ask me some questions, and I asked the reporter to interview the students. And these students didn't have time to prep or anything, but was able to articulate what this day meant to them and what does the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King means in their life. And that was one of many things that inspired me, but definitely to see those students still embrace the vision of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was inspiring. I would also like to say that being nonviolent is militant as well. If you think about how the television was used as a weapon to show how racism is a problem in this country, how segregation was a problem in this country, and he was militant by just being on the offense and putting them on the defense and showing the hypocrisy in America. So for me, I know people say, well, you know, he wasn't yelling like the Black Panthers or he wasn't yelling like the US organization, which those two organizations were phenomenal in their time during the Black Power movement. But during the Civil Rights movement, he was just as militant as any other organization that we talk about today.
I completely agree. I'm of the mindset that it takes all types when you have the battle. Like, you know, you have infantry, you have intelligence, you have air support. Like, you know, there's all types. Everybody has a job to do. There's a lot that it takes to fight this fight. So, yeah, I mean, I appreciate Dr. King for what he did. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I could get stabbed and forgive the person. I don't know if I can have
No,
my
you
house
can't.
bombed and forgive the person. I don't know if I can be walking through Cicero, Illinois, where he said that was the march where he truly thought if he was going to die in the march, it was the one in Illinois, where ironically, Obama gained the vote in one of the most perceived divided, I don't know if it's a city or a county, but I believe it's a city. In Illinois, Obama did fairly well. But if you think about it, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was marching through that same area, and they were talking about killing him. They were talking about lynching him. So, you know, I just think that people discount what he really went through and try to say, well, that was passive and that was this. He accomplished a lot and put his life on the line and his family life on the line.
100%. And what's sad is on a day like today, when we have the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act that's sitting there, the Freedom Voting Rights Act sitting there, and they're refusing to sign it, what was his life for? What did he do all this for? What did all those people who gave their life on those bridges during those marches, having dogs attack them, having fire hoses turned on them, peeling their skin, having, sitting at lunch counters and having people spit on them? What do we say about that? Dr. Martin Luther King died for this very thing that we are fighting today, still today.
I agree. I believe there's an attorney on the line, and attorneys were super popular during the civil rights movement because they had to get people out of jail. And we have to remember the infamous case of Brown versus Board of Education, which was initially started by Charles Hamilton Houston and his work, and then picked up by Thurgood Marshall and his team. Attorneys and lawyers played behind the scenes, they were key to the civil rights movement as well. And Dr. Martin Luther King seeking advice and getting out of jail and all those good things.
I agree. They were definitely in the, I'm gonna say the fourth. They were in the back, but when, hey, it is what it is. But when even today, every election there'll be a group of attorneys ready and willing to help if somebody's trying to stymie somebody's voting rights, and that's just something we do. One of the things I wanted to bring up, a couple of things. Two, to clean a couple of things up. Reagan signed the bill saying it was a holiday, but states still had the choice. And so one of the regular things that happened was, and I just remember from, Public Enemy, one of the last states to do it was Arizona. Arizona's argument was, we already have a holiday. And I think the last state to actually recognize MLK Day as a holiday was in 2000. So it took 14, 15 years for them to actually recognize it as MLK Day, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Day, for all 50 states. Another thing I wanted to bring up was, I know, shout out to Brother Jeff, shout out to Brother Omar. After Parade, there was a gathering at the MLK statue in Aurora, and a lot of people don't remember. We were kind of bringing up the fact that he was losing influence. When Marcus said he died penniless, he was losing influence. People were no longer listening to him. And one of the things he did when he went to Memphis, he was there for workers. It was the sanitation workers, and he was there they were trying to unionize, and he was there to help them. That was the day before he died, the day he died. And I don't know if Omar remembers this or Hashim. One of the things that we were doing, they were giving out free dinners at the MLK statue. Anybody who was, bring them to you. If you were homeless, if you were there, if you were sick and shut in, we're putting together dinners. And one of the things that, that group did was, there was a bunch of striking workers on the picket line, and people took dinners to those workers on MLK Day. And I don't know if we know how significant that was. That was a direct extension of his legacy. Of the day that he is being celebrated, we were giving back. We were giving back. We were giving food, time, energy, and love. And I definitely took some dinners out there to some of those workers. So just wanted to bring that up.
I think that was extremely key, and that they're still out there on the picket line in the coldest weather. They were on the front lines during COVID. We have to remember they were considered essential workers during COVID. If you recall, they were complaining that they didn't even have the N95 mask. They were just trying to wrap themselves up with T-shirts, anything they could find to keep stores open so that people would be able to shop. Mm-hmm. I just think that I hope this strike ends soon, because I know some families that are suffering. At the same time, they owed their due. They sacrificed, and we have to understand, some of them caught COVID. Some of them were impacted for the rest of their life. And to stand at the foot of the MLK statue and for all these people to talk about how the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King meant to them, have you had a conversation with those workers? Have you had a conversation with those unhoused people that we fed? And I'll say the same thing I said last year. If we're feeding the same people each year, there's something we're doing wrong in our society.
Well, I also want to bring up, there was a gentleman there who was, I think he was the last person to speak. I don't know if Brother Omar or Sheen remember this.
I do.
And the most telling part about his speech, probably honestly, of all the speeches, I remember that one the most, is when he was like, "This is where I live. This is my home." And when we're talking about his home, he's right there, Colfax, on the street. You know, this is where I live. And it was just profound for him to be like, thank you, one. And two, you know, we're going to be here tomorrow. Like, what are we doing the next day? All right, MLK's over. Woo, pat yourself on the back. But what are we doing the next day? What are we doing next week? Just like it goes kind of Omar, what Omar was saying, like, if they're still homeless and we're doing the exact same thing with the exact same people in the exact same group, you know, how we failed. And he kind of brought it home. That gentleman kind of brought it home for me. This is my home. Thank you. But what about tomorrow?
So I'm curious, who is the we that has failed?
Well, hey, go ahead.
Or who do you feel it is? You know what I'm saying?
Well, if you want to separate it, I'll say me then.
So you failed as an individual, or has the collective failed?
See, you got to be careful when you start talking about the collective, because you don't know who the collective is. I will say me, because I can take responsibility for my actions.
So you're responsible for hunger?
No. I'm responsible for my actions.
Okay.
So I can say I can do more. So if I say we, then it needs to be turned to I, and I take responsibility for me. But I can do more, if that makes it easier.
Gotcha. So what about you, Omar?
When I say we, I think I put that in different buckets. First, are elected officials and policymakers who control budgets and control resources. If you're going to yell and scream and quote the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., then make sure your vote, when it's time to vote for something that improves humanity, that improves or enhances the lives of those people who are struggling right now, then I hear you. But if you're doing the total opposite, then you're just being extremely performative on that day. And so when I say we as a collective, because, you know, we've participated in this voting process that have put some of these people in office, whether we voted for them or not. The bottom line is these are our policymakers, and some of them come down, some of them with good intentions, some of them just have different feelings. But the bottom line is they come down there. It's good to see my good friend Steve Douglas on. And I know you out there with the strikers and the Kroger family. So just want to send our prayers and thoughts with you, Brother Douglas. But with that stated, they come down there and to say, I checked the box. When we were down there at that same time, Brother Carter, one of the unhoused gentlemen had to be over 65 years old. We were there, no one else was there, literally cried in tears and said, no one cares about us. Who's looking out for us? Who's the ones that's making sure? I'm 65 years old. I can't work. I'm disabled. See, I need to see your vote align with you coming out there quoting those quotes and giving those statements. I need to see that you really mean what you say. And sometimes, or I'll say a lot of time for some, it don't align.
Nope. What about you, Stefania? Is it I failed or we failed or who failed?
No, I agree with Omar 100%. I think that we can do so much as an individual, and we absolutely should be doing our part. But I think as a collective, it's the policymakers and the people who have control of the budgets. 100%. They're the ones that are failing our homeless community like that. They are the ones that are honestly failing. It even goes higher than that. I mean, we were talking about voting. That is absolutely something that Martin Luther King marched for time and time again, was the right to vote. And we're here in 2022, and there's a lot of voting laws that are repealing everybody's ability to make it to the polls. Homeless, Black, Latinos, where will we be if that's taken away? How do we get those policymakers and the people who control the budgets, the right ones in those places, so that we can make sure that the monies go to where they need to go?
Yeah.
We need to adjust the tree root.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I don't think I failed, right? Like, there's always more that I can do, but do I say I get an A+? No. But there's so many grades in between A+ and failing that I'm not gonna I'm not gonna take the responsibility of our government and throw it on my back, right? Because I don't have the resources to provide like our government has, that has an obligation to take care of these people. So in the sense of, could I have gotten 10 more people to the voting poll to vote for issues and things that help the least of these in society? Sure, then I failed in that aspect. But society has failed because gentrification has been allowed, the stripping of resources has been allowed, the ignoring and turning the blind eye has been allowed, the demonizing someone for being homeless, the demonizing for someone when their only option is to sleep on the streets. Listen, my Black behind will have an issue going to go check my mailbox in this temperature, knowing that I can return back to somewhere warm. Sleeping on the streets, and we want to make these things harder for that person, like that bothers me. And I look at that as a systemic thing, and it chaps my behind every time I see Mike Kaufman get his anti-poor birther self up at a mic at a Dr. King celebration and have something to say, while he is helping to lead the charge, if he's not leading a charge, to demonize homelessness. And we hear society say that, when you do that, you hear government, the typical government response is, where's the money going to come from? But yet there's plan and action in the work to refund law enforcement. Right? Like, when we have to go to war, God forbid we should have to go to war because of what Russia's doing over there right now. But if we have to go and send troops, it's done with a Thanos snap, and we don't question where resources come from, but for some reason we have it to send our troops, to send more lives over there to die. But yet we have people dying here. We have people being hungry here. And hunger is one thing I don't grasp. Like, I understand what it is to be hungry, but how is it allowed? I don't grasp. I when I look at the waste that we do in society, I don't understand how we have hunger. When, please don't ever confuse me with the conservative or these the nationalist tone, the xenophobes of, when we have money for foreign aid, when we have money for other countries, like, I don't understand how America is suffering so much. Like, those things, they kind of blow my mind, but I understand how white supremacy works. I understand how classism works. So,
I go ahead, Stefania. My apology.
No, go ahead.
My dog is about to have a conniption if y'all hear him in the background. Hey, buddy. The thing that, come here, buddy. The thing that you said something that was key, Hashim. And I said this on the mic, that we have an Edmund Pettus Bridge of today, and there was the same Edmund Pettus Bridge, the issue that they were crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge today. Voting rights was in 1965. Poverty was in 1965. And what are we still addressing today in 2022? Voting rights. I mean, people want to blame Biden and say, well, Biden didn't compromise this, that, and the other. No, there are just some people who are out there who are still trying to restrict the right to vote so that they can maintain power, period. End of story. It's about how can I make sure that people in Georgia, black counties and rural parts of Georgia, have to go miles away in order to drop their ballots off, when a ballot box can be right there so that they can easily have that access to vote. Or when that initial bill came out, where they said if you even give a person a bottle of water while they're waiting in line, that could be a citation and that could be illegal. So when you begin to look at the people who are putting these policies together, I would argue that they have the same character traits as those that were at the end of the bridge waiting on John Lewis, that stumbled on them, that used their horses to beat them down, that used nightsticks to beat them down. I would argue they have the same characteristics, because we should be doing everything in our power to enhance the right to vote and to make sure that everyone has equal access, and not doing everything in our power to restrict it.
Yeah, you get no pushback on that argument. Not at all. Those are the same. They have the same characteristics. That absolutely 100%. And I'm not afraid to call them out by name. That's Cruz, Hawley. I mean, those they are the ones that are saying that you can't even give. They make the lines longer because they take away the boxes. So now you know the lines are going to be extremely long. Now you can't give them water, and then on top of that, you deputize the wrong people to police those lines. Where are we going with this?
Backwards. We are definitely going backwards. And speaking of going backwards, we had one of our followers, one of our viewers, make the comment, stated that there's a white guy here from rural area. Many of us are aware of the fact that the government assassinated MLK. We're becoming more aware every day of the injustices and will stand up for the minority community. So sometimes I'm the wrong one to play ambassador or the liaison, but thank you. Thank you for that. I want to acknowledge it, right? And there's people that have been in the trenches longer and deeper than I have that are like, yeah, whatever, and blow that off. And sometimes you catch me on the right day, I'll be like, yeah, whatever, and blow that off. But I want to acknowledge, because we don't all enter into the battle at the same place. We all haven't served the same amount of time in the battle. So I say, welcome to the battle. Look around, cover your head, and catch up quickly. Because the ancient African American proverb that is applicable to this is, we tried to tell you, right? We tried to tell you. We've known it so. J. Edgar Hoover was a bona fide racist himself. He was a white passing black man who helped lead the assassination and the demonizing of Dr. King and pushing the negative opinion of Dr. King through illegal wiretaps and helping out with assassination attempts and to besmirch Dr. King's character. So it's of no surprise to Black folks who know that the government has been a willful accomplice, if not the perpetrator, in the assassination of many Black people, of many programs and leaders who push towards an equitable state, or even just towards a state of let us live. So the extermination, the genocide of the native people of this land, I mean, that was government sanctioned. So we should not be surprised, but thank you for realizing it. And I'm going to look for some links to drop some reading sources up here for him and for others and those who we want to share it with. Like, yeah, play quick catch up, but thank you for joining, but it's no surprise.
Martin Luther King gave a sermon where he talked about recognizing our white people that help in the fight. So it's of importance to him to make sure that we recognize them, because we need them. We need to band together. You know, we're the only way that we're going to get things done is when the white people do join the cause.
I mean, we have to. First of all, I want to thank the individual for making that statement, and also appreciate them for isolating race. When you say who I am and how I identify, one, you know, that takes a little bit of being courageous, and at the same time not knowing how the response is going to be, because you're putting it out there and you're trying to be an ally, and at times it's well received and at times it's not. But, you know, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King had a diverse pool of people working for him. But we have to recognize it wasn't a movement about diversity. It was the movement about the treatment of Black people. It was movement about the segregation of Black people, forced segregation of Black people. It was about how Black people was disenfranchised. It was about how Black people didn't have their full rights as citizens. So we have to understand that what I think get lost is that sometimes they say, well, you know, Martin Luther King had a diversity movement. The movement had diverse peoples, but the issue was isolated to a particular people that were being disenfranchised. Now, that movement was a model for other groups to understand how to fight for their civil rights. And that's when the collaboration began with different groups. And those other groups had their history for fighting for civil rights. It was just that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. knew how to use that new tool called the television. That's how genius he was. He knew how to use that new tool called the television during that time to show the hypocrisy and of the United States, to be out in Vietnam saying we're fighting for the rights of people, but yet restricting the rights of people right here in your own country.
Yeah, I mean, and still forever was like, I don't know if the government, if that will ever change. Like, even, you know, that was something that really spilled over from World War II, World War I, the Civil War, Vietnam War is what Dr. King, when it was during Dr. King's era, and when the nationalism demonizing him for speaking out against the war, you know, it's just it's weird. I mean, then you fast forward, and so civil rights is enacted, but wars are still continuing, but cops are still killing us. And you know, it's a funny smirk I get when I see the videos of one of these white racist officers pull over a Black driver, and that Black driver steps out the vehicle in one of the uniforms, one of the military U.S. military uniforms, and yet they continue on. Right? They continue on with the mistreatment, with the assumption of him, with pushing the white supremacist narrative. And I'm like, this hasn't changed since my grandfather's days. You know, it's just, it's exhausting.
It is exhausting because it changed language, but it didn't change what it is.
Yep.
It's different, but it's not different. I mean, you hit it on. You talked about it a little bit earlier. You hit on a little bit earlier when you talked about genocide, and with the new Jim Crow laws, we may not see genocide like how you think genocide looks, but genocide absolutely 100% is when we have tons and tons of 17, 15, 16-year-olds that we've given life sentences to. Life sentences without parole. And until that was declared unconstitutional, those gentlemen who got life sentences at the age of 16, 17, they didn't have children. They didn't get married. They're not procreating. That's genocide. And they know what they're doing. And this is what Martin Luther King and everybody in 65 and 68 marched for: voting rights. So all the people out there who are listening and watching, as many times as we said it on this show, vote. You've got to vote. We've got to get the right people in the seats. We've got to get the right policymakers in the room, and we've got to make sure that we are creating the laws and legislation that we want to see that will help the people.
I want to go back to something Hashim and Michael was talking about when we talked about who's to blame or did we fail? I think that was the question. And I wouldn't say failed, but I will say that there are some things we can do. I remember going to Belize. We were scouting a place to do a study abroad class. And something hit me. I didn't really see any homeless people. I'm talking about Belize. I'm talking about a country that don't have the resources of the United States. And I asked one of the people, I said, I noticed that you really don't have an unhoused population. He said, because that's our family name. We're going to take care of that person, and we're going to do what we can regardless of what their situation is. We're going to stand by that person. So there's one end where we need policies to help, especially those who may not have family, those who are really out there alone. And then there's a side where community can come together and figure out what is our role. Although we may not hold the purse strings, that's why I appreciate what Brother Jeff does. During COVID, he opened up his culture center and was feeding hundreds of people every single day. Not just one day a week, but every single day. And those are just some things that's within our community power that we can do. Opening up places or where people can start a business, possibly get a job, workforce initiatives, do what we can to protect them, to protect them and get them resources so that hopefully they can get out of that situation. And if they're in that situation, what can we do to keep them safe and to let them know that they're not forgotten? Those are things I think that is within our community power to do.
I think the only thing I wanted to say, just, I don't know if it's pushback, but yeah. Let's remember, I don't think it's pushback. Let's remember this country is 250 plus years old, but this democracy is only about 50 years old. So I don't say not that we're learning, but it's growing. This democracy is only 50 years old. Okay? It is. It was created, whatever, go look in whatever history book you want to look in. The country's 250 years old, but the democracy is only 50. It's only 50 years old. And maybe when I say we just have to, more needs to be done in embracing a democracy. The scariest part of all this is watching people fight against the democracy, the actual ability for everybody to vote. And maybe it's because it's so young, and maybe it's because it's so young, but literal people fighting against the ability for other people to vote. And I get upset when anybody is against another person voting, even if you hate what their vote represents. One of the things that came out, they were talking about that rural area in Georgia where they were limiting the number of polling booths. It wasn't a 100% white area or a 100% black area. When they are coming after your right to vote, it's not just your right to vote, it's everybody. It limits everybody's right to vote. It limits everybody's ability. No, see, there's the pushback. You have to be willing to fight, even for people that you don't like. Even when you don't like what they're voting for, you have to be willing to fight for that right to vote. I told you I was going to get pushed back.
What was
Go ahead,
boy, wake up.
There you go.
Okay. Stop
Right.
doing that white shit and creating this monster that's not there. It wasn't pushback. So the smirk that you got was me smirking at the dog growling, right? Stop assuming. And the systems that are in place, the issue that democracy is having, because you have this over-bloated, obese thing called racism that was around before the democracy, that was around before the country, that was around even before though that raggedy ass boat, the Mayflower, hit the shore, right? And so it's this over-bloated, obese thing that's trying to fit into this tailor-made democracy that we're having the pushback and the issue on, right? So I take issue with people saying that it's relatively new. What is relatively new? That all people can vote? Like, deal with it. Okay, that's relatively new. That's not my issue to deal with. The problem is the over-bloated, the obese thing of racism, white supremacy, that is the issue. Trim the fat, chop it up, squeeze it, whatever you got to do to get rid of it. But that the issue of democracy being new is not the problem. The problem is the old stuff that's trying to come along. And I think there's too much kumbaya of trying to make sure that that stuff can come along, or that we can bring those people over, or that type of win that type of mindset over. No, that's just not what I subscribe to. Like, chop them off, forget about it. And there's a whole group of people out here who have not been exposed to this democracy, who don't know how to participate, that we completely ignore because we aren't going out to talk to them. We're trying to convert people who have made a clear and distinctive choice. They don't want to have nothing to do with us.
And I would just add, voting is about rights. How you just treat someone is about your humanity. And I put them in two different categories. I know how to say good morning. I know how to treat people. I know how to treat people with goodwill. I know that lynching is bad. I know that imprisoning people because you can, for whatever reason, and you want to disenfranchise a particular group or a particular population, that's just people exerting their power to continue to keep another group subservient. That's what that's about. That's about humanity. Voting is a right, and you fight for that right, and you hope the people that you put in there do right. But other than that, people go in there, or people just go in with their own feelings and emotions. And if they feel I'm not human, that's how they're going to treat me. If they feel like I'm worthless in society, that's how they're going to treat me.
You're not American.
There's a difference between the right and how we treat people with humanity.
Good point.
Yeah. So I want to throw something out.
Okay.
Why don't we do this voting rights stuff under Obama's administration? Why didn't, in his first 2 years, why didn't we take care of all this? That when everybody was happy to have our first visibly black president take the office, why didn't we push through voting rights, lock this stuff down? Colorado still could have been the blueprint, like it was in this John Lewis bill, to have voting rights done.
I think we all know why. Because we knew. Go ahead.
Because we knew, or did we have too much trust that, the same system of renewing that happened time after time again, that would fall into place because we believed that people would do the right thing to vote to renew the Voting Rights Act?
Well, I think first of all, I don't think that it would come to this, what's going on now. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't think that they would roll back laws like they are today. And I think that the reason why you're seeing this is because the first black man in office taught people that, oh yeah, this could happen again and again and again. We can become president of the United States. We are, citizens of this country. We vote. We are smart. Head of laws reviews. Yes, it can happen, and that pissed a lot of people off.
But why weren't we pissed off from what happened at the Reconstruction, the Civil War, right after the Civil War? Like rolling back is nothing new. Jim Crow rolled back. Like we know what that side and that heart is capable of. Why do we act so surprised at the behavior now?
But we were active participants in the subversion of democracy, or inactive participants in that subversion. We knew that it was BS. We were living in it. No, we knew that. And so going forward, what are we doing? I think now still we are active, those same active participants in a limitation on democracy. I think the news programs that we consume are part of that chipping away at democracy, that chipping away at not just our right to vote, but other people's rights to vote.
Right.
We can see it. Go ahead. Sorry, Stephanie.
No, you're good. You were still talking.
Go ahead.
Well, you keep saying others' rights to vote. And I think what we're missing here is that even when they wrote the Constitution, the forefathers wrote the Constitution in the very beginning, they were operating from a place of exclusivity. They never, ever meant or thought that when they said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they would have to go back and say, oh, all men, all men. The same way that when they wrote the voting laws, that they would have to go back and say, oh, we have to let women and Black people vote? Oh. So now that they've written those, I mean, Martin Luther King even said it. He said, I'm going to misquote this probably pretty badly, but he said, the Constitution says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And America has written a check that has been returned for insufficient funds for where colored people are concerned, where the people of color are concerned, not colored people, because they didn't mean to include us. They didn't mean to. But when we fought to include us, to see us as human, as you said, Omar, to see us as people, and somebody, a senator today made a quote about not being American, seeing us as American, then we have, you know what I mean? They are operating from a place of exclusivity. So why would they ever think that this would happen? And now that it's happened, they're chasing their tails trying to make sure that it doesn't happen again and that they can go back and exclude us.
Well,
just go ahead.
Real quick, and I'll give it back to you. That was my argument, that this democracy is only about 50 years old. The country's 250 plus years old, but the democracy, or even the attempt to be a democracy,
right,
is very young. But, and going to the second part, yes, they are trying to limit. They are trying. There's a concerted effort to limit your ability to vote. But I'm also saying that I believe we are also part of that, where we're active in that limitation to vote.
In what way?
If you allow rhetoric to dictate who should be allowed to vote and who shouldn't be allowed to vote, then you're part of subverting that democracy.
Who we?
All right.
Yeah.
Who's the we?
That's allowing rhetoric?
Anyone who consumes anything that indicates this person should vote, but this person should not.
Got you. And, we can do this all day, every day, sun up, sun down. There's so much to talk about, right? Like there's so much history to talk about, but we're approaching the close. But Carter has hit on an issue that happened way back with the Bacon's Rebellion. Read about that. Read about how poor whites and blacks teamed up, and then the compromise of the deal that was struck with the poor whites and the break off, and the black folks became the target. But then you can also fast forward from that point and look at Nazi Germany and how they picked off different groups. And so we fast forward into today, the message really has to be one of unity, right? I mean, it really has to be one of unity if we're going to do a blunt fight against this, a blunt fight against capitalism. I shouldn't say solely, but that should lead it while we're also working for the other things there. There's never been a moment of black progress in this country that black folks got out of that issue on their own. That's a fact. I don't care however you feel about it. Find me one thing that supports otherwise, and I'll go ahead and eat that crow pie. But there's so much for us to talk about. And Dr. King's message was about black people first, or was talking about black people. Then it got diverse in that fight and that struggle. And that's the key right there. We have to be diverse in our fight and our struggle to come out of this. And people have to realize that if it hurts one of us, it hurts all of us. Mm-hmm. And once that is realized, I think we'll definitely be in a better place. So
good point, Hashim.
Yeah. So I think we are at that everybody's favorite moment time, that dope black thought. I'm good. I ain't got no thoughts. I'm exhausted today. So who wants to take us out on that dope black thought? Mine is all profanity riddle. So
I like to yield it to Brother Carter.
Lord Jesus.
No. Anybody. All right, here. This is not a dope black thought. Look. Colorado has near universal voting. If you have an address, you are going to get a ballot, and they don't care who you vote for, but you are going to be given the opportunity to vote. Why can't that be everywhere?
Because of all the Senate Republicans, Cinema and Manchin, right? It's because of them. That's exactly why it can't be.
Holly Cruz.
And I'm against anybody who is anti-vote. I don't care what you vote, but I want you to vote.
Hashim, you asked why didn't this happen under Obama? Because as soon as Obama came in, first thing they said was, and there was some Democrats that said this as well as Republicans, we want to make sure you have a failed presidency. Oh, yeah. I think he had to weigh what could be passed, what couldn't be passed. And then he asked something that I think is key. He said, I want you to come and yell and scream at me so then I can share. This is what the people want. Mm-hmm. And I think we did become a little laxed and just say, okay, we got a black president, and probably wasn't as strong of a voice as we should have been. But we have to remember, we can't ask a man who only was president for 8 years to correct all of the issues of racism that has been here for 400 years.
I knew that Obama cape would come out from somebody.
I have
but like, y'all are gonna have to catch us on another show when we dive more into this, because there's lots of stuff that we need to talk about, especially here in Colorado, with the governor having a plan to renew law enforcement budgets.
Oh, that's going to be a good one. But I have a dope black thought.
All right.
And I'm going to quote Martin Luther King, because that was the topic of our show today. Martin Luther King said, mankind must, and this is because we have a war on voting right now. Martin Luther King said mankind must eliminate wars, or wars will eliminate mankind. So, going forward.
What is love? Is the drug. Let it rotate, digging it back in it. Calling me Is it really worth the wait? I don't get it.